Hi, it's Willow here, and I'm here today to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart. And the title of this video pretty much says it all. I'm here to talk about a subject that is related to my professional life and also my spiritual vocation, and that is astrology. And the title of this video is Astrology is Not Evil, and Astrology is Not Inherently New Age. Okay, so I'm going to divide this video into two halves, and the first one is that I'm going to address the I would say false ideas that astrology is evil. Okay, and the second half I will talk about how astrology is not New Age, but how New Age thinking has been merged with astrology in many respects, and how most modern day astrologers are practicing a New Age form of astrology, or are practicing astrology that furthers and promotes New Age beliefs. Okay, so I differentiate myself from that in that I am a non-New Age astrologer, and I'm actually a New Age critic, and I've been a New Age critic throughout my professional career as an astrologer. I've done a fair amount of work on deconstructing the New Age pseudo-spiritual pyramid scheme. So as you can imagine, if you are of the New Age persuasion, you are probably not going to enjoy this video, but my apologies. Okay, so the first half of the video is astrology is not evil. No, it's not. But this is a common ethic that is kind of being portrayed through or put out there through Christian channels that I've come into contact with, and I'm sure there are also similar views in other religions. Okay, I will just say that I grew up in a country that is majority Christian, and so that's the religion that I'm most familiar with. I will also say that I don't have an organized religion myself. I've not been baptized or christened into an organized religion because my mother decided that we should make our own choices. Her children should make their own choices on that front, and I'm glad that she did. So this is also not a video that's bashing organized religion. It's just a video that is setting out the tenet that you can have a relationship with God, you can have a relationship with your higher power, you can be a spiritual person without having an organized religion, and no, all spirituality that exists outside of organized religion is not evil. Okay, now there are some evil things going on. There are some evil things co-opting spirituality and co-opting things like astrology, and I'll go into that. But what's happening is a sort of a throwing the baby out with the bathwater type of scenario, where people are just making blanket statements that, again, all astrology is evil, all divination is evil, paganism is evil, etc., etc., right? So I will just give a little bit of reference as far as my own spiritual base or spiritual foundation, let's say. So when I was 13 and 14 years old, God came into my life, and I use the word God. Other people can use different words like the Creator or Allah, Yahweh, the divine. What there's different words for it depending on what your orientation. But what God showed itself to me to be was sort of an all-knowing, all-loving intelligence, and it was the energy, the source of all things, right? So everything was part of this loving intelligence, and this loving intelligence was a guiding force as well, and could help us through some very dark times. So when I was 13 and 14 years old, I was going through a very, very difficult time. And I won't go into the details about what was going on, but basically I came into an understanding that sort of hit me like a ton of bricks about how cruel and heartless and corrupt and unjust and unfair the world could be. And in particular, the thing that really disturbed me was I was starting to understand that the adults were also, in many cases, not doing the right thing. They were, in many cases, indulging, the lesser qualities of themselves, let's say. And so as a child, you look up to the adults around you as being sort of the moral compass and people you can look to do the right thing and to also to help guide you, right? And so I realized in that time in my life that that wasn't the case, that the adults were actually just as messed up as the kids were in a lot of respects, right? And again, what was going on in the adult world was not right in many cases, was not how things should be in many cases. And so this kind of threw me into a crisis state. Okay, so this is when God made itself known to me in this very dark moment. Okay, so I will just say that I am very much a spiritually oriented person. I consider astrology a spiritual vocation. I consider my astrological skills to be a gift from God. To help me and to help other people to properly navigate our lives in these times, and also to understand things to a deeper degree, so that we can make better choices and better decisions from that level of deepened or broadened awareness and understanding. So because I practice astrology as a spiritual art or a spiritual vocation, it's very disturbing to me that people would declare astrology evil across the board. Okay, so to me, what astrology is a tool. Okay, astrology is basically a natural. It's a nature-based system, right? Related to natural cycles that happen throughout time, and related to just again connecting to nature and the way things are on Earth. And this is something that is, again, a tool that can be used for good, and it is also a tool that could be used for ill, right? So I'm not saying that all astrologers out there are using astrology for good reasons and good purposes, because that's not the case. Absolutely, there are people who are using astrology for nefarious purposes, to gain power, to gain the upper hand, to mislead people, to create orchestrations. The powers that be have always used astrology to plan their orchestrated attacks, orchestrated events, orchestrated traumatic events, right? I've talked about this in previous videos. So certainly astrology can be used for bad purposes, for evil purposes, but I don't believe that astrology in and of itself is evil. So astrology is a tool, just like a hammer, okay? So a hammer can be used for good. It can be used to build a house, right? Or it can be used to fix a fence or put up a fence, or what have you. But it can also be used to seriously hurt or kill someone, right? So the hammer itself is not good or evil. It's the person who's using that hammer, and the result of how that person is using that hammer. That's very much how I look at it. And so the thing is that I'm not just floating in the wind with these ideas. I believe that even in the Christian Bible, there is acknowledgement that astrology is this type of navigational tool, or this type of sacred gift, right, that God can give us to help us through the times, okay? And I will read some of these. Now, first off, there are multiple references to astronomical and astrological phenomena in the Bible, and I won't go through those, but there are many references to it. The three wise men, the Magi, who basically sought out Jesus, found Jesus after his birth, were using astrology, basically, astronomy and astrology, to determine when Jesus's birth had occurred. Okay, so right from that point, there are references to astrology being used for benefit. Okay, so it was a good thing that those wise men found that baby, right? and I'm speaking in, in Christian like I'm speaking out of the Bible, not necessarily my own personal views, but so in Genesis 1:14 it says, "And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred signs and days and years." Okay, so what astrology is basically is looking at the celestial bodies. Now, I will say this is sidereal astrology, and I practice Western tropical astrology, which is a little bit different. But basically, it's looking at the celestial bodies for signs, right? For signs and for, again, guidance, for insight, for timing, all of these types of things, right? And so we see that those three wise men were looking for the star, they were looking for the sign in the sky that a new king had been born, right? The King of the Jews. And Matthew 2:1-2 says, "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, 'Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him.'" So once again, they saw the sign that Jesus had been born, and they followed that star of Bethlehem to find him. Okay, so some historians believe that the three wise men were actually Greek astrologers. No, I don't know, but it's a theory out there, okay? And basically what they've concluded that the Star of Bethlehem was Jupiter rising ahead of the sun, heliacal rising, so I don't know how to say that word, but yeah, basically Venus, all the planets, actually, yeah, Venus is one that I know that is either an evening star or a morning star, so it'll either be rising in the morning or the evening, right? And Jupiter as well. So the belief is that the Jupiter rising before the sun was the sign that this new king had been born. And there is an Old Testament prophecy that a new king would be born in the family of David, and basically the idea is that the Magi were observing the skies, waiting to see a sign that this had happened. Okay, and that's what they believe happened, was the Star of Bethlehem. Okay, we also have information on this in Corinthians. Okay, and this is particularly about how spiritual gifts of sight, gifts of divination, etc. Can be gifts from God. So again, I'm not saying everyone who practices astrology is practicing it as a gift from God. That would be the hope, right? That's not reality. But again, it's not astrology that is evil. It's not studying the celestial bodies and hoping to receive insight from God or insight from the higher power. It's how it's used, okay, and it's by whom it's being used. Okay, so Corinthians 1, chapter 12, verses 4-11, all talks about spiritual gifts, okay, and it says, "Now there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are diversities of administration, but the same Lord. And there are diversities of operations, but it is the same God which worketh all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another divers kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and the selfsame Spirit, dividing to every man severally as he will." So again, this just talks about the different types of gifts that God can give human beings in order to discern spirit, spiritual guidance, discern God's will, discern God's love, God's grace, etc. Okay. So I realize that there are a lot of different interpretations of the Bible, right? And that's all the different factions of Christianity, and I'm sure the same exists in the other organized religions as well. That there isn't just one way to be a Christian. There isn't just one set of beliefs if you're a Christian, right? The fundamentals are always there, but there's a lot that's left up to interpretation. Okay, but again, I would say that these instances, these verses in the Bible, show that astrology can certainly, the gift of, sight, prophecy, divination, can certainly be a gift that is straight from God. Okay. There's also, I would say, a misuse of the word pagan out there as well, which is meant to sort of mean evil, heathens, people who are doing occult practices or things of that nature. So I will also say that the word occult is not synonymous with evil, as far as I understand it. Occult traditionally means secret knowledge or hidden knowledge, okay? And so, yeah, when there is a body of secret knowledge or hidden knowledge that is traditionally only available to the rich and powerful, certainly that body of knowledge can be used for ill, for bad, for evil things, okay? But again, occult, the word occult itself does not necessarily mean evil, right? It's taken on that connotation. Same with the word pagan, okay? The word pagan at its root just means country dweller, somebody who lives in the country. This girl. So I can understand this, right? Because it's basically the idea that these civilized city folk who look down on the dirt dwelling backwoods country folk, right? They use pagan as sort of a slur to mean heathens and people who don't have God and people who aren't Christian, okay, basically. So once again, most Christianity does tend to use the word pagan synonymously with evil, just the way that it uses occult or astrology as synonymous with evil. And again, I would say there's a differentiation, a distinction to be made there. Now, is there such thing as the dark arts? Are there people who are using occult knowledge for dark and sinister purposes? Are there people who are misusing occult knowledge and energy and practices without even knowing that they're misusing them? Yeah, absolutely there are, right? Absolutely there are. You have to be initiated, and I don't mean initiations you create yourself. I mean, you have to be brought into this knowledge layer by layer, and you are tested at every point for responsibility with this knowledge. No one is going to be given this knowledge by God unless they have shown that they can be responsible with it and that they can use it for good and true purposes. So I would just ask Christian people to think about this a little bit and to think about the ways that you may be misusing these terms as slurs, okay? Because pagan has certainly been used as a slur in the past, again, to mean sort of like unrefined, uncivilized, heathen country people, right? But again, that's a judgment call that I don't believe is accurate or theirs to make, right? People who lived in the country certainly had their own spirituality, their own spiritual practices, their own relationship with God, right? And in particular, they found that relationship with God through nature, okay? And so that's astrology is one of those things, one of those ways to connect with nature and connect nature into the spiritual element of things. Okay, so now moving on to a very thorny subject, and I've addressed this a few times, which is that astrology is not New Age. And I'll say astrology is not inherently New Age. Now, most current day astrologers are practicing a New Age version of astrology. They have merged their astrology with New Age beliefs, or they are at the very least promoting certain New Age ideas through their practice of astrology. And that is widespread, right? And so some of the catchphrases of the current day New Age paradigm are ascending to 5D, ascending to the fifth dimension, raising your vibration, creating your own reality, the law of attraction, oneness, I would say misuses of the term oneness, right? Ascending to a new earth, right? This idea that they're moving in this new direction. There's a staunch belief in spiritual hierarchy. So I'm a spiritual anarchist, and I don't believe in spiritual hierarchy. I think it's a scam, basically. So that's another thing that you can pick out. I won't go into it. Love and light is a common, all part of the divine plan. What else? Transcendence of the old earth, transcendence of 3D reality. Anyone who isn't an adherent to New Age ideology is considered unenlightened, unawakened, unevolved, a 3D dweller, person existing in density. And there is some sociopathy associated with New Age that would say that these 3D dwellers just need to be sloughed off, i.e. they need to die off. Okay, and possibly get a little bit of help, a little bit of democidal help with that process. They believe, that again, they are sort of coming from a superior consciousness, and at a certain point, the people of inferior consciousness, which would be people like me and anyone who isn't a New Age adherent, are just simply going to die off, right? Okay, so yeah. Anyway. So, just to illustrate what I'm talking about, astrology, people have studied the celestial bodies for tens of thousands of years now. So early forms of astrology have existed for 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years now. Even the earliest sort of like recorded astrology that would be very more similar to what we're using today is 4,000 plus years old. Okay, so the astronomy has sort of astrology and astronomy are connected, but they're two different practices. And astrology is again sort of looking for meaning, looking for insight, looking for signs, looking for understanding from astrological symbols and from astrological / astronomical phenomena. Okay, so again, the practice of astrology is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. Astrology used to be taught in medical schools because it's a very good diagnostic tool. So it has a long history. Now, New Age actually dates to the late 1800s. So it's a relatively new phenomenon, and there may be some earlier forms than that, but this is when the late 1800s is when New Age ideology sort of became crystallized and when it became a widespread phenomenon. And so two of the people who are considered the earliest, sort of the founders of New Age thinking, of modern day New Age thinking, are Helena Blavatsky and then Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey followed after Blavatsky, but she kind of built on the ideas of Blavatsky. And the religious or spiritual umbrella that they used was called theosophy. Okay, so those are some of the people that are associated with early New Age. Some other people are Annie Besant, Foster Bailey, which was Alice Bailey's husband, Henry Steele Olcott. Yeah, just those are some of the earlier people. So Blavatsky was alive from 1831 to 1891, and she co-founded the Theosophical Society in 1875. She wrote a book called The Secret Doctrine in 1888, and that's probably her most famous work. There have been a lot of suggestions that she plagiarized a lot of that book from different, kind of scrapping it together from different religions and different spiritual texts and that kind of thing. But one of the tenets in The Secret Doctrine is that the Aryans were the most spiritually evolved race and just the most evolved race in general. And there were the other races, many of the other races were considered subhuman, subpar, of inferior spirituality, of inferior consciousness levels, right? And that those people would just die out eventually. So you still see this same, what I would say, bullshit spiritual hierarchy pushed in modern day New Age, right? You've got the enlightened New Agers and then the unenlightened clods who just, again, they're so useless, they just need to die off, right? And so Blavatsky, the people that Blavatsky considered to be subhuman were sort of like more tribal type people. Again, I guess you'd call them pagan people, right? People who were living on the land and living a kind of like nature-based spirituality and very connected to the natural cycles and that kind of thing. So in particular, Africans, Australians, and South Sea Islanders. Those were some of the groups that she pointed out. And as you might imagine, one of the more famous villains of Earth was a big fan of Blavatsky, reportedly, and that is Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler, yeah, surprisingly, also I will say he was born in 1889, so he was born the year after the Secret Doctrine came out. So apparently, according to lore, Hitler actually had a copy of the Secret Doctrine at his bedside, right? Because of course we know his obsession with the Aryan, and of course, yeah, I'm not gonna wade into the whole, who was behind Hitler, who was pulling the string, all that kind of stuff, because that's a different topic. But you can definitely see this idea that the Aryans are the superior race, the superior people, and anyone who isn't that is subpar and basically deserves to die. Basically might as well just die off because they're useless, they're pointless. Okay, so then following Blavatsky came Alice Bailey. And Alice Bailey was born in 1880 and she lived until 1949. And she founded what was called the Lucis Trust, Lucifer, right? Luciferian person. Okay, she founded the Lucis Trust in 1922 and also Lucifer Publishing Company. They're very open about this stuff, okay? Very open. And Bailey straight out called for New World Order, okay? She was a big fan of one world government. She supported the United Nations. It was very, very out in the open. Okay, and I'm just going to read just a little bit of just one statement that has been made by Bailey just to back this up. So she talked about a new group of world servers. Okay, and you hear this talk a lot in the United Nations type of framework as well. And she claimed that 1934 marked the beginning of the organizing of the men and women group work of a new order with progress defined by service, the world of the brotherhood, the forces of light, and out of the spoliation of all existing culture and civilization, the new world order must be built. And then, of course, we hear this new world order echoed throughout all of the politicians, all of the high-level politicians of the times, right? They're all talking about it. They're all putting it out there. 1990, I believe, is the first televised. George Bush Sr. talked about, I believe it was September 11th, 1990. September 11th is a date that's commonly used for these types of things. And he talked about the New World Order. Joe Biden has talked about it. Stephen Harper used to call it global governance. That's a conservative leader in the U.S. in Canada, in the country I'm in. He used to call it global governance. It has different words, but it all means the same thing. And so you can see the roots of this stuff, right? Alice Bailey also practiced and taught what is called esoteric astrology. And so that is astrology that is New Age, okay? I wouldn't even say it's just merged with New Age. I would say that's full-on New Age astrology. Now, that's not to say everyone who claims to practice esoteric astrology is aware of those roots. I'm sure most are not, right? And the word esoteric can mean a lot of different things. Again, just like pagan, occult, all those things can have different meanings. So I'm not saying anyone who declares as an esoteric astrologer is coming from this pseudo spiritual pyramid scheme, but it is what it is, right? And as I say, I'm not, I'm not even sure of a percentage because I don't keep up, too well on the world of astrology these days. Unfortunately, I'm pretty disdainful of like pop astrology, meme astrology, like TikTok, Snapchat astrology, that sort of like soundbite astrology, because I don't think that that's the best way to use astrology. But again, people love it. So yes, but I would say 70 to 80% of today's astrologers, and certainly the most popular astrologers, because New Age is very well established. It has a lot of money behind it. It has a lot of beautiful people, charismatic people behind it. I would say that, yeah, about 70 or 80% of that astrology is at least going to be influenced by New Age, is at least going to be promoting some degree of New Age. And I've come into the contact with this many, many times where astrologers are not aware that what they're promoting is New Age. They're not aware that their astrology has become merged with New Age thinking. And actually, some astrologers, it goes to the extreme that one relatively well-known astrologer that I've come into contact with was a big fan of Alice Bailey, and so that like threw up red flags for me. And at the same time, he has been asked to be part of an astrology conference where they were critiquing New Age and deconstructing New Age. So it's honestly a little bit of a farce, because like I say, 70 to 80% of the astrology I've come into contact with is tinged by these New Age beliefs, right? And this idea of like spiritual hierarchy and ascension and transcending the suffering of Earth and all these things, right? But most astrologers keep that they don't advertise that. If they're even aware of it themselves, they don't advertise it. And many times I've come into contact with people who claim to be New Age critics, who are actually what I would call soft New Age themselves. So they're not self-declaring as spiritual or New Age gurus, let's say, but they certainly are promoting New Age, and they're certainly being rewarded by that extra boost in platform, right? Because again, the New Age is very, very well established, and it has a lot of money running through it. And so if you talk that talk and walk that walk, you will receive a certain popularity and certain monetary rewards, and certain, again, sort of being looked to as this guru up on a pedestal. That those are the rewards of work in this system, which unfortunately is going on. And it's going on not just in the world of astrology, it's going on in many different worlds, the worlds of natural health and healing, organics and health food stores and yoga, and I would say all divination tools have the potential of being merged with New Age. And so I really do believe that New Age is demonic thing. Okay, I'm just gonna say that I really do think that it is a scam. Okay, it's a scam. It's false light that people are being hopped up on. It uses elements of mesmerism and hypnotism and cultish thinking, cultish behavior. It definitely plays on spiritual narcissism, spiritual ego, spiritual materialism. It plays on kind of the clickiness and trendiness of human beings, like how they want to always be in the know, and they want to have these, have these certain workshops and I don't know, experiences under their belt, like notches on the bedpost, right? New Age notches on the bedpost, like, oh, well, I've been to Hawaii to this healing center, and oh, I've learned under this yoga guru, and it's that kind of thing. I will also just mention that the law of attraction, the so-called law of attraction, which of course was behind the Secret craze. I don't know if everyone knows that, but I was right in the thick of that. Back in 2006, this book and then video came out about The Secret, and it was all based on the law of attraction and creating your own reality, how basically nothing external exists. We're all creating it out of our own minds, and every negative thing that happens to us is a product of our own bad thinking, negative thinking, dense thinking, you know. Again, just sociopathy that has no connection to you know, power hierarchies on earth and how power actually works, and sociology and sociological phenomena, and you know, just the lack of sort of like socio-political awareness, and the lack of how power actually works, and it's maddening. But the law of attraction was a theosophist belief taught by Helena Blavatsky. Okay, so once again, yes, it goes right back to New Age. And so, as I'm saying, just to reiterate, astrology has been co-opted by New Age, which I don't think is a good thing, right? Because I don't think New Age is a good thing. I think New Age is a scam, a scheme. Basically, it operates like a cult without a singular cult leader. So there are actually thousands of New Age cult leaders, right? And then they bring in their minions, and it's kind of like a multi-level marketing scam. So then the minion, I know that's kind of a rude way to put it, but the followers, okay, they bring in the followers, and then the followers strive to become a guru that has people under them, and it just, you know, it just keeps going down and down and down, like a multi-level marketing scam, basically. So once again, astrology is tens of thousands of years old, right? Certainly the form that we practice today is 4,000 or 5,000 years old, but people have been making star maps for tens of thousands of years. They've been studying the sky, studying the stars, and yes, partially for insight and for signs and for symbols and for insight and deeper understanding, navigational, using it as a navigational tool. That's primarily how I use astrology. I use astrology as a navigational tool and a tool for deeper insight, because I think with deeper insight into yourself, into the people around you, into the world around you, you can just be, you know, a more effective person, and you can make better decisions, and you can, you know, life is not as bumpy, right? If you have this beautiful tool of astrology. So astrology is not inherently New Age, and astrology is not also inherently evil. Astrology is a tool, and it depends on how it is being used. Now, if astrology is being used to promote New Age beliefs, which I believe are false spirituality, then that's not a good use of astrology in my mind. Okay, that's something that frankly needs to be exposed, and more people need to be aware of it, so that at the very least they have to choose their path. So they either choose to follow New Age astrology or produce New Age astrology, or they choose not to. Okay, so the overall idea here, and this is a spiritual anarchist tenet for sure, is that we all are basically just placing our own bets on the best life to live, or a good life to live. We're using our limited human awareness of the situation, right? True believers. Oh my God, that sounded culty. Please scratch that off the record. For believers, for people of spiritual faith, they're placing their and I understand combining gambling and spirituality might not be the best analogy, but in my world it flies. Okay. So yeah, so we're all placing our bets, we're all making our wagers, kind of thing, on the best life to live, and on what is a good life to live, and what spiritual principles do we live by to live a life that is, again, for atheists, this would be like just a life that is in alignment with your conscience and with your own values, right? For people who are of spiritual faith, it would be, how do you live a life that is pleasing to God, that is of service to God, that is according to God's will, right? And that is one of the ways that I use astrology to suss out in these very, very complex times what the best route is. So basically, we are all placing these bets, and at the end of our lives, I believe that we come into an understanding of whether we've bet correctly, right? Whether we've placed wise bets or whether we have not. But the problem is that if you're forcing your ways on someone else, or if you're saying that other people's life means less than yours does because your consciousness level is superior to theirs, you're forcing their hand, right? So we all have to be ready and willing to take the consequences of the bets that we've placed, i.e. the ways that we've lived our lives, okay? And so trying to force other people to live the way you live, to believe the way you believe, to make the same choices that you've made, is not a good way to be, and it's wrong to do that. That's what I believe. Of course, this means, aside from the fundamentals of not hurting each other, not killing each other, not destroying each other, and etc. Right? I'm talking about where it's a matter of interpretation. And I know that sounds, that possibly sounds a little bit new agey in and of itself, but it really isn't, right? Because the thing is that I really do believe we all have our personal spirituality, we have our personal connection, either to God or to our own consciences, right? And I don't think it's my place to force my views on anyone else, but I also dislike having other people's views placed on me, and in particular, in the case of this video, other people's views being placed on my profession, which I consider a spiritual vocation as well. I consider the gifts that I have to be, again, given to me by my higher power, so that I can help myself and help other people with these gifts. And you can actually see it in my astrology as well. I have Jupiter and Leo in the 12th house. So that would just be an indicator of some type of spiritual gifts, spiritual creativity, and these types of things, right? So again, I don't think that it's any human being's right to judge that. You can make the discernment of whether you think what I'm doing in the world is good or not, but ultimately that's my choice to make. And if you don't like what I'm doing with astrology, you don't have to come into contact with it, right? That's basically the long and the short of it. So this is just a little clarifying video as far as what I believe is a mistaken view, okay? And this view is held by a lot of Christian people, right? And I think what Christian people are doing is they're rejecting New Age, but they're also, again, like I say, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so they're throwing out things like astrology and, any type of, maybe crystal healing, or healing with herbs, or, observing the moon cycle, or all of these things that people have done for tens of thousands of years now, right? They're kind of tossing that into the evil pile, or the bad pile, when I think it is actually the co-opting of those things by New Age that is the problem. Okay, so again, it's all in how you use these things. It's all in whether you're using these things for beneficial purposes. And I do understand that a lot of people in the New Age believe, probably all of them believe that they are doing something good in this world. Unfortunately, when you look into the deeper roots of what New Age is, and also when you see the level of mesmerism and the kind of parroting of the same ideas, the same idioms, the same ideology that they've been parroting, again, since the late 1800s or even before, you start to understand that this is not something that is empowering for human beings or for human spirituality. And in fact, it is not real spirituality. This is coming from my perspective, but this is also coming from 20 years of exposure to New Age astrology, New Age astrologers, New Age ideology, New Age, healers, and seeing the grip that New Age thinking has in all these worlds, right? That I mentioned. It's certainly not just astrology, but as a professional astrologer, I feel that it's my duty, let's say, to make these differentiations, because I think that, again, people are just sort of making blanket statements when you actually have to understand how the New Age tentacles have reached into these worlds, and it's a fine-tooth comb sort of discernment where you're determining real from fake and good from not good, and things that are meant for the empowerment, and particularly the spiritual empowerment of human beings, and things that are meant to misguide people, steal people's time and energy, or even involve people in straight up evil practices, right? That's the caution with this. So anyway, with that, I will end off this video, and I hope that I've come across, I hope that I've made my points clearly, and that I'm not, I'm not trying to be an inflammatory character on this front. But as I say, this is 20 years of observation and experience on my part, 15 or 16 years as a professional astrologer. And I very strongly believe that my practice of astrology is in alignment with what my higher power wants for me and wants me to be doing on this earth. And again, I will come to the end of my life and see whether that was the correct idea or not. And so will the Christians who are claiming that astrology is evil. They also will come to the end of their lives and be shown the truth about that matter. Again, we're all kind of making our own choices on this front. And I just want to reiterate that because someone's spirituality and someone's connection to God exists outside of the confines of an organized religion, that does not mean it's a lesser connection to God. It does not mean it's a corrupted connection to God. And this is one of the views that I would very much like to see shift in the doctrine of the organized religions of today.